All right, let's talk next to Bob from Southern California. Bob, welcome to The Narrow Path. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Steve. My question centers around something a Episcopal priest I have as an acquaintance, a female, constantly refers to God as she. This is at variance with my reading of the Bible, and Jesus Christ always used male pronoun, gendered language, so that was always good enough for me. And I put the question to her, why do you always refer to God as she? It sounds pagan to me. And her answer is, well, that's because the Bible was written by men in a culture dominated by men. I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure, I'd be glad to. There are two branches of the Episcopal Church. One is quite liberal, and the other is more conservative. And the more liberal branch is already, ordaining homosexual priests and so forth. I take your position. I think that Jesus was not prejudiced one way or the other about men and women. Mm-hmm. He may have been in a patriarchal culture, but that doesn't mean that when he came as the perfect revelation of God to humanity, that he would be a product of that culture. And
right.
Yet he was very consistent in saying that God was his father.
Yes.
And using male pronouns, and that he was the son of the father. I mean, these are male images. Now, God is not male or female. When we talk about people being male or female, well, at least we used to base it on biology. Nowadays, we don't know what they base it on, But for many millennia, male and female were categories determined by biology. Well, God doesn't have biology, and therefore he doesn't have those characteristics that we identify with male and female. He transcends gender or transcends sex, but in the terms that are used to help us relate to him, the Bible almost always uses masculine imagery. He's a king, not a queen, for example. Right. He's a father, not a mother. The terms that are used of his position in relation to people, male images are used. Now, of course, there's some exceptions in the sense that Isaiah says, can a mother forget her nursing child or fail to have compassion on it? Well, she may forget, but I will not forget, says the Lord. Now, God's not saying he is a mother, but he's saying that his attention to Israel would be as attentive as, or even more attentive than that of a mother. And it's very possible that even the word father and king are somewhat metaphorical. I mean, certainly in the sense that a king is an earthly office and a father is an earthly thing. But our relationship to God is analogous to subjects to a king, or servants to a lord, or children to a father, and so forth. Now, I think if we remove that language, we are going beyond what Jesus said to do. Jesus said, when you pray, say, Our Father. Somebody say, well, that's because he was in a patriarchal culture and we aren't anymore. Well, the fact that he was and we aren't is not an argument against doing what he said. It may be our culture that's drifted, not his. We always assume that since all the cultures up until very modern times were patriarchal, that they were unenlightened. They were out of touch. Our culture is the first one to be enlightened and to not be patriarchal. And look how enlightened we are. We've now defined marriage as a union between any sexes. We've gone to the point of saying sex is not determined at birth. It's not determined by biology. This is how smart our generation has become. Virtually every culture in history has tended to be patriarchal, and then we have rebelled against that in the last couple generations. How do we know that our last few generations have been the most enlightened, the most in touch of all? I think there's very good evidence that our last few generations have been the most unenlightened of all, that we can't keep our marriages together. Half of them break up. Our kids are going wild. People commit suicide in record numbers. People are going to psychologists and therapists all the time. I mean, I don't see evidence that we are the most mature or intelligent culture that's come along. As a matter of fact, at this time, there are people listening to me probably who are in their 30s and still live at home and maybe have never lived elsewhere. Whereas in previous cultures, usually people grew up when they were in their teens and became independent. So we are less and less impressive as culture. And just because we have thrown off the patriarchal norms of all cultures previously, and also thrown off the definition of marriage that all cultures previously had, and also thrown off the common sense that all cultures had of being able to recognize between what's male and female, and things like that. Who knows what's next? Eventually, we'll say that even being human rather than a cat or a dog is simply a matter of preference. This is a culture that has become entirely dislodged from realities that all people knew for thousands of years before. So we have to decide, is Jesus, just accommodating a benighted culture when he calls God Father instead of Mother, when he calls God He instead of She? Or is it we who are out of touch with reality? Why should Jesus, whose language, by the way, agreed with all that of the prophets and all that of Moses, and frankly with that of almost all humanity before and since him until recently, if he happened to use the same language they did, who are we to say he was wrong and suddenly we're the ones who know better than him? I'm not impressed with the intelligence of the argument. I'm not impressed with the objectivity of the argument. I think it's just narcissistic. I think that we have what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery. And chronological snobbery means we think we're better just because we lived later in time, because we've gone through change. But not all change is an improvement. There is such a thing as changing in the direction of deterioration. And I believe that a good argument could be made that the mentality of moderns in the Western world has deteriorated radically from a more sane and more intelligent and more in touch mentality that was held through most of history before. But if we had only the Bible to go on, I'd say, if Jesus said when you pray, say, Our Father, and I decide because it's more popular today, or with a certain group of people it's more popular to say Our Mother, then am I going to make up my own religion or go with that which was revealed by Jesus Christ? I can make up my own, but I shouldn't call myself a Christian if I'm doing that, because Jesus Christ is the head of the church. What he says, he's the head over all things to the church. And he's the bridegroom. He's the husband. He's the master. He's the king. He's all those things that the Bible uses masculine terms for. And while, again, God is neither masculine nor feminine, he has chosen to relate to us in terms that connect us with masculine metaphors. And Jesus himself, obviously, the most perfect representation of God. So I'm going to just disagree with your friend.
I disagree with her as well, and I knew I would get a brilliant answer from a brilliant broadcaster. To use a radio metaphor, I think we are in a culture that is submerged in satanic static, and this reflects that.
I would tend to agree with you. I like that metaphor. Thank you, Bob. God bless you. Good to talk to you. I appreciate that call.